Hey everybody, in this video we're talking about tire inserts for gravel bikes. Does it make sense to use them? What are the pros and cons? And of course, are they hard to install? Now in this video we're taking a look at one particular brand of tire insert. These are the Tubeless Gravel Inserts that were sent over for review. And so in this video, while I will be experimenting with these particular inserts, I'll try and talk in somewhat general terms about tire inserts for gravel in general. But of course, first thing we have to do is get these installed. So let's just take a look at what we have here. Tannis makes a ton of different inserts for various applications. This particular one is, again, the Tannis Armor, designed for tubeless tires. So in the box, this is what you get, a very kind of standard looking tire insert. It's just one piece of foam that's meant to sit on the rim to sort of support the sidewall a little bit and to offer some protection against rim strikes, which in turn will hopefully allow you to run lower pressures without fear of damaging your rims. So the bike that we're going to be experimenting with is the Masi Encanto. This is a titanium gravel bike sent over from Bikes Online. I have another video about this bike and titanium frames in general, so if you're interested in this bike, you can check out that video. We're actually going to be swapping the wheels over entirely to a set of the Logos Epoque version 2, which I'll have another video on. But nonetheless, first thing we have to do is drop the wheels and tires off of this bike. There's actually a video of Keegan Swenson on Instagram right now where he installs a Tannis insert in like 20 seconds. Sort of meant to show that it's pretty easy to install. I will try and edit this part as minimally as possible just to show you the full process. And what you want to do, get one side of your tire bead on the wheel first, lined up nice and straight. Then we want to get the insert, and there's one spot here where it says air valve. So I think right there is where you want to get the tubeless valve aligned. Don't believe that the inserts are directional. That would be very weird if they were. We're going to get the hole for the air valve right over the tubeless valve as our starting point, and then I think just work our way around. A little tricky. This would be easier with bigger tires, of course. These 700C by 40 tires. Kind of getting in the way a little. Okay, so I got maybe 2/3 of it right now, and starting to get pretty tight. Okay, almost. Okay, so it's on, but it kind of needs to be rolled into position a little bit. I think it's where it needs to be. I can show you what that looks like. So we've got one side of the bead on. The insert is on the rim with the hole for the air valve, I don't know if you can see that, aligned with the tubeless valve. What I'm going to do now is start to get the rest of the bead on. I imagine this part's going to be the tricky part, so you've got to get the bead in between the rim and the insert. But you also kind of want to get the bead of the tire down into the well of the rim, because that's what makes it easier to get the tire bead over the wall when it gets real tight. So I'm going to do my best to just kind of get some of the bead on, establish some tension. Yeah, that's going to be super tight, obviously, because the bead is not like in that center channel. Now the question is, do I want to pour sealant in now and just kind of risk making a mess, or do I get the tire on and then install through the valve? I don't know. I'm gonna take a little bit of a gamble here. I'll pour some sealant in to the tire now. All right, so I'm gonna pour in a couple of ounces of Stans just right into the tire, directly in there. And then now I just got to get this bead over the top. I'll do my best to set the bead down into the channel so I can give myself a little slack. Yeah, this is getting pretty tight. I don't want to have to resort to using a tire lever because of my pride. Come on! Ah, I got it. All right. Did not need a tire lever, but it was definitely not easy. Now, actually, I imagine that with all that material kind of pushing the tire bead outward toward the rim wall, I might not even need a compressor to set the bead here. I'm going to catch my breath, see if we can just seat the bead this way. I got some pressure, heard the bead set. There's some more. Holy smokes, that was easy. Let's take a look, make sure the bead is actually set. Oh yeah, perfect. Wow, that was incredibly easy. I guess I still have to do the sealant dance? I'm not sure. I guess, yeah, there's no reason I wouldn't have to do the sealant dance now. Okay, it was surprisingly easy. All right, so now we just have to get the back wheel on. I won't bore you with the front installation. It's going to be just the same. So let's fast forward through this part. All right, so that was actually super easy to install. It was just one extra step, but I don't think it made the rest of the process any more challenging. Now, I know with mountain bike inserts, it might be a little bit different. I know historically with CushCore, there's sort of this stigma around getting them installed. Now, Tannis also makes tubeless inserts for mountain bikes. I haven't experimented with these yet, but I probably will in the future. This is kind of like an interesting modular insert design. There's a tubeless light insert, which is like a really small insert designed for like cross country and gravel. And then there's what's called Tannis Tubeless Pro, which is like a bigger insert. And then the Fusion, you can put both together. So you can literally put the small insert inside of the bigger insert to sort of maximize protection. It'll actually give you some run flat capabilities, but that's what this looks like. I don't have experience installing these yet, but if it's anything like the inserts for the gravel wheels here, should be pretty straightforward, to be quite honest. Anyways, let's get out on the road and I can give you my thoughts on how the inserts actually change the ride characteristics of the bike. All right, so I've had a few weeks to ride on this setup, and I have to say there is a somewhat noticeable difference. Not so much in the area of flat protection. I don't typically ride trails that are gnarly enough that I'm striking rims all the time and risking flats. But the biggest change that I felt is in the lateral support of the tire while cornering. Now, it did take me a little bit of time to get the tire pressure right. With the insert, I've actually been able to run tire pressures 3 to 5 psi lower than typical. Now, on this 700C by 40 millimeter tire setup, I'll typically run like 34, 35 psi. And with the inserts installed, I've had to reduce the pressure down to about 30, 31 psi to sort of get it right in its sweet spot. Now, by no means do I ride so hard that I'm, burping tires and railing berms and stuff on the gravel bike. That's just not my style of riding. But I can say I definitely felt a difference while cornering. The tire just feels better supported even though I'm running at lower pressures. It's almost as though the insert sort of aligns everything in the vertical axis. Because you're running lower pressures, you do get added compliance in the vertical direction, but the inserts sort of limit the lateral degree of freedom because the foam inserts are literally pushed up against the lower half of the tire sidewalls. Which brings me to the topic of ride quality. Now, historically, sometimes with older generation mountain bike tire inserts, the insert would be so beefy and take up so much air volume, the ride quality was often deadened to the point where the tire doesn't even really feel supple anymore. With the Tannis gravel inserts, that wasn't my experience. I think the insert itself is not so large that it impedes the natural suppleness of the tire. And so again, because I'm running 3 to 5 psi lower than typical, you actually feel that in the vertical direction, just due to the tire's deflection, and it actually felt pretty good. Now, as far as weight goes, the Tannis tubeless inserts, they only weigh 70 grams per tire. At the moment, they only have one size, which is good for 700C to anywhere between 33 and 47 millimeters wide. And even at 70 grams net weight gain, there wouldn't be a huge difference in ride feel. 140 grams between the front and the rear of the bike. Most riders are honestly not going to be able to tell the difference. But the other thing is that the insert actually takes up a lot of volume inside of the tire, so I actually didn't put in as much sealant as I normally would. For a 700 by 40 tire, I'd normally put in about 3 ounces of sealant per tire, but with the insert, that almost felt like overkill. So I actually only put in 2 ounces of sealant per tire, and being that an ounce of stands weighs roughly 30 grams, we're only really looking at a 40 gram net weight gain per wheel, which honestly is virtually imperceptible. Now, I will be forthright in reminding you that I actually swapped wheel sets to the Logos Epoque G2 gravel wheel set during the installation process, and overall that wheel set actually dropped the weight of the bike by about 1.5 pounds. So you can call it a flawed experiment if you want. I definitely did not isolate the variable of inserts versus no inserts, but again, this wasn't really meant to be a scientific account of running inserts versus not. So anyways, to address the original question in the video, do tire inserts for gravel bikes make sense? Based on my experience over the past few weeks,
Unfortunately, I just have to say that it depends. It depends on a couple of things. It depends on the style of riding you do, and it also depends on the typical terrain that you ride. Now, contrary to popular belief, the original design intent for a foam tire insert like this was not actually pinch flat protection. Rather, tire inserts were originally designed to improve cornering support for mountain bikes. By adding a ring of foam that fits tightly to the rim and physically pushes its way outward against the tire sidewall, burping tires during hard cornering becomes less frequent. And it also afforded the ability for the rider to run lower pressures without the tire feeling squirmy during hard cornering. So in the context of gravel, I think the same concepts apply, and you kind of have to ask yourself the question of whether you ride hard enough that your tires start to feel squirmy during hard cornering while riding at your preferred pressure. And yes, you do also get some pinch flat protection due to a reduction in rim strikes, but that's also going to depend on your particular setup and riding style. For instance, I have some Pirelli Centurato Gravel M's on a set of the first generation Logos Epoque wheels. I've never had any rim strikes or any issues with bottoming out on that setup. Whereas on the original build of the Ritchie Outback, I had a set of extra light Rene Hurst Oracle Ridge tires mounted to the relatively narrow aluminum Ritchie Zeta GX wheels. And on that setup, I often bottomed out just because there wasn't a lot of sidewall support due to the extra thin sidewalls. So for me personally, the original setup that I had on the Outback would actually have been a pretty good candidate for gravel tire inserts just due to the nature of that particular setup. And then of course there's a consideration of cost. In my opinion, tire inserts have always seemed exceptionally expensive for what they are. Again, you're basically just getting a ring of foam. And so when considering the Tannis tubeless inserts, these are actually on the lower end of the price spectrum, but they still run $50 a piece. So if you're considering running these inserts front and rear, you're looking at $100 in parts, not to mention the cost of labor if you don't want to undertake this installation process yourself. Now, for me personally, here in Southern California, the type of riding that I do, which is generally pretty mellow, non-competitive riding on trails that are not super chunky, then tire inserts for gravel bikes for me don't make a ton of sense. But if you tend to push your equipment a lot harder or ride down terrain that's a lot rowdier, or if you just have a more fragile wheel tire setup like I originally did on the Ritchie, then tire inserts for gravel bikes might make sense. Okay, so that's going to do it for this one. If you have any questions about my experience with the Tannis Tubeless Gravel Inserts, just feel free to drop them down below. We'll try and get back to as many as we can. Thanks again for watching. Thanks for subscribing to the channel if you haven't already. We'll see you next time.